Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to our weekly mastermind, where today we're going to be looking at how to use your voice to make an impact. And as always, we're going to start with a quote. Today's quote, guys, is: there is a pleasant firmness of tone when one is in alignment with oneself. A beautiful quote by Peter, let's say Hoeg. I don't know how to enunciate his surname, but I really, really love this. And I think this is the golden thread of what we always talk about. But before we get started, I'd love for you to write in the chat, what are some of the challenges you face when having to use your voice to make an impact? So if you're listening on the replay in Facebook, use the comment section below. If you're listening in the replay on YouTube, use the comment section below. Use this time as a way of really connecting with, okay, what are my intentions for this recording today? And one way to do that is to look at, okay, what are some of the challenges that we face when making or using our voice? So if you've just joined us in the chat, we are writing down what our challenges are. We're writing down in the chat, in the comments section, what are some of our challenges when using our voice? Do you feel like you are presenting your voice and making an impact? What are your thoughts on that in the chats, in the comments below? And if you haven't already done so, make sure you've got a pen and paper with you. Make sure you've got if you've got your own professional speaking manual, you can make sure you've got that ready for today's mastermind. What challenges do you face when having to use your voice? Well, we've got lots and lots of challenges. We're writing long descriptions in the chat, it seems. Okay, so your voice strengthens your gestures. Absolutely fantastic, 100% agree with you. One of the tips I'm going to share is how using your gestures actually is a way of enhancing your voice. So again, that balance, that's great. And it's an important tool and we need to become aware of it. We need to take care of it. That's great as well, because like always, remember, to become a great professional speaker, it's just about practice. And one thing that I've always loved is that I realized that even if you practice your speech over and over and over and over again, and you know it off by heart, it will never come across in the same way, because your emotions and how you feel will be different. Where, whenever you're presenting, because you might have the day before experience something really great, you might be going through something really difficult, and your voice does carry the vibration of what your emotions are, which is why being grounded is really important. Okay, great. So there are many different challenges, and a lot of the challenges that I've been getting from people are, I work with a lot of expats or a lot of French people who are trying to speak English, or a lot of people who are immigrants living in maybe New York, for example, and they're trying to present, but English isn't their first language. And people often feel that the clarity of their message, and they can't really enunciate the words correctly, and it's a really difficult one for them. One of the problems that I sometimes come across. Another thing that I sometimes come across, people don't really know what using the voice even is. So what is tone? What is intonation? What is reflection? How do you use your voice? So we're going to look at all of those things today. So another question for you in the chat, guys, is there is a difference between using your voice to communicate effectively, but I'd like you to shift your intention. And I'd like to ask you, how can you use your voice effectively to make a lasting impact? Do you see the difference between that? Using your voice just to get the message across clearly, and actually using your voice to make an impact. In the chat, what do you think the difference is? How would you use your voice differently? And again, if you're watching in the replay, in the comment section below, either on Facebook or YouTube, just jot down, what is the difference between using your voice effectively, to communicate clearly, and then to make a lasting impact? I'll give you a few seconds to write that in the chat. Not using breathy, airy vocals to tell a story. I'm excited to hear what your presentation is later. Some physical action, meaningful gestures, taglines to connect with the audience emotionally. By taglines, do you mean your closes, your catchphrases, your convinces, your quotes, Irene? Is that what you mean? Yeah, cool. I like that a lot. And I think maybe we can do a presentation on that. Maybe you and I, Irene, can do something on that, because I like this idea of learning about convinces, learning about those mic drop moments where you're actually making that lasting impact. I like that. Mic drop moments. Cool. Great, guys, thank you. So today what I'd like to do is I'd like to share 7 tips with you, very simple tips to use your voice effectively. Now, the first is the pause. The pause is very important because, like you were saying earlier on, if you're going to make an impact, what you want to do is you want to give your audience that space to maybe think. So you pause before you're about to say something important, or you pause when you want the audience to think about what you're saying. So if you've just had that mic drop moment or that tagline, then maybe you want to give the audience an opportunity to pause to think. That's point number 1. Point number 2 is to speed up. Now, speeding up, what it does is it creates urgency. So the faster you're speaking, the more urgent you're coming across, the more compelling, the more emphasis, the more excitement. So if you're trying to convey an emotion, then one thing that you can do is you can really use your words to speed up. Now, the general rule of thumb is to try and use a variety of different types of techniques, not just using only pauses, or not just speeding up all the time. Try and vary all of these different techniques. And when you go into your breakout rooms in a moment, I'm going to give you an opportunity to try all 7 of these tips. So speeding up is a great way to convey excitement or, emphasis about something. Number 3 is what you were saying, Veronique, is to project your voice. Again, depending on how big your audience is, this is an interesting one, because if you have a microphone in front of you, You don't necessarily need to project your voice. You actually need to keep it a length, a distance apart from you. And Irene is the expert on this, but it needs to be a relative distance far away from you. Otherwise, it comes across as you're shouting. I have quite a loud voice anyway, so I actually have to keep the microphone further away from me than certain people. But if you're not using a microphone, then yes, projecting your voice, imagining that you're speaking to the people in the back of the room is a good way to project your voice. Number 4. There's a difference between using your voice just to read something, to tell a point, or to really use your voice as if you were living that story, like you were really in that story. And as professional speakers, one of the things that is really powerful is if we can actually get the audience to feel what it would be like to experience it. And the way that we get our audience to experience it is by living that story ourselves. So if you're able to really go back to that emotion, often I talk about this in my one-to-ones when we do meditations, we go back and you're smelling the same things and you're in the same place and you're seeing the same things. So really living that experience. That is how your audience is going to live it, because if you're faking it, then they're going to also not be experiencing the same thing. They're going to know if you're faking it. So living that story is a great way. And when you're living that story, it automatically comes across in a natural way in your voice. So it's not coming as rehearsed, you're just relaying a story from memory. Very different. This is what you ladies were saying in the beginning. A great way to naturally be more expressive with your voice is to use bigger gestures. Now, when you're on stage, it's easier because you can open up, right? But when you're on screen, it's slightly different. So maybe what you want to do is just sit more openly or stand more openly. But having that space to open up your body language, sitting up straight, shoulders back, naturally your voice is going to project more. It's going to come across as more strongly. So the bigger your body language, the bigger your tone. The smaller your body language, and Irene, you're an expert, but it has to do with the vocal cords, it has to do with your body and how it's actually physically affecting your voice. Here we have one of my favorite actors, and this tip for you guys today is to articulate your words as much as possible. I think it's really, I'm very blessed to have a reasonable English accent. And when the English speak, they really enunciate every word. I sometimes say to people, imagine it as if you're the queen and you're having a cup of tea. Maybe you don't want to speak like that during your presentation, but in a natural way, try and enunciate your words, especially if you're speaking to a global audience. And a lot of global audiences don't have English as their first language. So enunciating. And a great thing about enunciating is that I find when I enunciate, I ground myself. I feel a little bit more grounded, and it gives me an opportunity to think about what I'm going to say next. So like the pause gives you a moment to breathe, enunciation for me is also an opportunity. I've saved the best tip for last. This is my favorite one. I came across the fireside chats. I don't know, have you guys heard of the fireside chats before as a technique? Any of you? The fireside chats actually came about, I think, I mean, I stand to be corrected, but President Roosevelt was apparently one of the most down-to-earth presidents, and they had this interview series called Fireside Chats. And what he would do, I think it was on radio or something, and what he would do is he would actually speak to his countrymen in a very conversational way. So what he would do is it's now become quite a beauty. I really, really love it. It's come across as it's now a technique that reminds us that we actually don't need to worry about body language. We don't need to worry about our voice. We don't need to worry about how we're coming across with authority, credibility, if we do what President Roosevelt did, which was he always imagined he was sitting on the porch with his best friend having a chat. And when you're having a chat with your friend, you're naturally using your body language. You're naturally using your voice. You're not coming across in a way that is pretense. There is no, maybe hopefully not too much fear, but you're just naturally coming across with confidence. And this also is a technique, because when we get on stage, when we get in front of the camera, we want to put on that mask sometimes. So it's a technique for us to practice. But I love this. I always try beforehand and say to myself, how can I come across to my audience that makes them feel like they're chilling with me on their sofas and they're just having a chat, they're having fun, and they're integrating and learning at the same time. So those were my 7 tips for you today on how to use your voice effectively, how to make an impact through your intentions. You see, a lot of those tips were intentional. And I'm going to put you guys into breakout rooms now. And you've got A, so decide who's going to be A, decide who's going to be B. And the topic we're going to be discussing today, if you choose, you're welcome to use your own topic, is your favorite book. What is your favorite book and why? And I'd just like you to chat for a minute, just describing your favorite book and why. If you have the 7 points next to you, try and use minimum of 3 of those techniques. Maybe 7 won't be possible in the minute, but try and use a minimum of 3 of those techniques. 1 minute to do the presentation, then 2 minutes for feedback. How did you feel it went? How did your partner feel it went? And then you swap over after those 2 minutes, and then 1 minute. B does a 1 minute presentation, and then you practice for 2 minutes. Before we go into the breakout rooms, any questions from you guys? Just unmute yourself if you do. Okay, so if you are listening via YouTube or via the replay, I'm going to say thank you so much for joining today. You're welcome to, and this is my invitation to you, of course, to practice this on your own, if you like, in front of the mirror. 1 minute where you are speaking to yourself and just trying these different techniques out, and you know, afterwards you can replay a video, or you can really just think about it, put some notes down in the comments, not in the comments, but of course, if you want to, share some thoughts in the comments below. You know, analyzing how it went for you and really having some fun. So today, what I really tried to go over with you guys is these 7 things. Number 1 is the power of the pause. The pause is super powerful to make a point. The need for speed. When you're trying to come across with more excitement and you want to create more intentionality, let's say. Urgency. Number 3, projection. Project your voice. Number 4, live it. Number 5, open it up. 6, articulate. And 7, come across very conversationally. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. Feel free to join us next week in our online mastermind. And yeah, have a wonderful week. We'll see you soon. Bye.